Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast, where we talk about real Canadian rugby. I'm Stu Hardy, joined by Jeff Robinson and Ed Pye. Gents, we've reached the end of the Pacific 4 series for 2025. Some very high-scoring games, especially in the final round. Because of scheduling issues, we were unable to record last week. So the good news is we have two games to talk about this time out. So let's get straight into it with New Zealand versus Canada. We talked about this before the series began that New Zealand were going to be going from Australia back to New Zealand. And, they had to get their preparation definitely in order. Canada had an extra week to get themselves all settled up. And, we're back in the same stadium in Christchurch where Canada won the series and beat New Zealand for the first time last year. It was very, very impactful affair. We start off with the Black Ferns getting the first points on the board, and then Canada able to respond really quickly and get them onto the board as well. And then we have the entire game is a whole tug of war effort. It's all like back and forth and stuff. And then, right at the death, final 5 minutes, Canada is able to get over, get the try, miss the conversion, and if this had been against any other team with the exception of like England, I think we could say like, okay, that's it, that's the game. But this is New Zealand, and it's in New Zealand as well. And you know, anyone, it doesn't matter which New Zealand team it is, whether it's the Black Ferns, the All Blacks, whether it's the Sevens teams, whether it's the under fives, all coming together. You know that they are going to play right until the final second. Even if that clock is redder than scarlet, it is going to be all New Zealand, especially in front of a home crowd cheering them on. And in the end, that's what it was, a try in the corner to tie it all up. And then just when they needed that kick to just go through the post to secure that victory, it curves a bit to the left. It's not going over. And for the first time in the Pacific 4 Series history, we have our first tied game. Canada 27, New Zealand 27. Ed, it's been a while since you've been on the podcast, so I'll let you take this one. What were your thoughts from the game?
Yeah, desperately unlucky for Canada, but also incredibly impressive. And then we saw New Zealand putting 70 points on the USA the following week. So that New Zealand team is no joke. They are the world champions. And they are building a very, very strong team going into the World Cup. So to go to New Zealand, to go to Christchurch, which is not a nice place to play at the best of times. Very cold down there, especially getting to this time of the year. Um, just an incredible performance. The Canadian forwards, I thought, were very, very impressive. And that's borne out by a lot of the numbers that we've seen around their scrum, their line out. Very, very good set piece. And they basically just played a very basic simple game plan, which, wasn't very complicated, but it was just back to basics, doing the basic skills well, catch and pass. And that was able to build pressure on New Zealand. So incredibly impressive. And I think they were able to follow that up. So Canada is building really, really strongly at the moment, I think.
And Jeff, guess watching this game, what were your thoughts? I mean, obviously, Ed said really unlucky at the end, but before the end, even being able to like answer New Zealand's attacking efforts, what do you make of all that?
I thought overall the D was much better than or the 2 weeks before against the USA. And building on what Ed said, I thought Menon and Royer especially were great. And you have to remember Canada was missing their captain too, Sophie de Goody. So I mean that was a monster performance from the forward pack and overall at the back line too. We lost, I believe, it was Tessier during the game too, our
Mm.
captain to an HIA and. So I thought Canada did front up pretty well. I mean, I don't want to place blame on anyone's feet. I mean, kicking 1 for 5 and is something that definitely, I guess, if Canada's got need to work on something for the World Cup, I get
Mm.
get kicking there. I know at least two of the misses were not easy. They were,
Mm.
I think, sidelines. I do believe the last one was one that should have gone over. But I think overall Canada can definitely keep their heads held high after that.
Yeah, I think it's very easy to look at a game like this, especially as close it is, and you can basically point at both sides of the field and be like, oh, if that had happened, then our team would have won. But if that had happened, their team would have won. And obviously, Shell only getting one of five conversions. When we talk about the Australia game, will show that that's clearly been like an area that she's improved on in just about a week. Um, but yeah, we had tries from Sumanu Tafa, Apps, Corrigan, Hogan Rochester, and Menin as well. So outscoring New Zealand in terms of tries, 5-4. Um, and I think there's a lot of positives to take away from this kind of game. And I do agree that there's opportunities for Canada to analyze and improve on. And missing out on the Pacific Four title is one thing, but missing out on the World Cup is completely different as well. I just want to point out that from everything I've learned about New Zealand rugby, is that if it's not a win, it's a loss. Like, and the stats prove it. It's shown clearly is that even though um, New Zealand had the majority of the possession in this game, and they were able to score first. They weren't. There was a significant time where it was just that Canada could answer anything they could do. This was New Zealand with the most advantage they could have. They were playing in front of their home crowd. They were, had that passion after being defeated by Canada for the first time last year. You have Portia Woodman-Whitcliffe, who's back in the squad, and but when all's said and done, you New Zealand conceded five tries. And yes, you can say if there was an alternative kicking option or a more accurate kicking option, this would have been um, consecutive defeats for New Zealand.
I do
They,
think their forward pack, especially in the set pieces, is vulnerable. I think they're
Hmm.
definitely vulnerable, and that's something that this draw showed again. That
Well,
if
well, check out these stats, Jeff. Canada, 100% scrum win against New Zealand, 92% line out win, 83% restart win. Um, They had more turnovers, 10-8. Um, the areas that they fell down there, New Zealand almost doubled their post-contact meters than Canada did. So New Zealand were incredibly effective in the contact area, and then tackle percentage, Canada was only at 82% versus 89% by New Zealand. So a couple of areas they can work on there, but just to be able to back it up year after year away from home incredibly impressive to me.
yeah,
yeah,
I would say Canada has the edge in the forwards against New Zealand. The back line edge is probably is more substantial towards New Zealand. But as I said, if Canada can keep a tight game, uh, they're there for the taking.
yeah. Unfortunately, we weren't able to see New Zealand being taken by anyone else in this tournament. But before we get to that game, let's go ahead and talk about Canada, Australia. So you have two teams that are on equal points. That means that it's going to be down to points difference, and it's the points that make all the difference. Um, Also, it definitely helped that for New Zealand, I should say, that Canada went first against Australia, and and Canada were then able to say, okay, this is the benchmark for points difference. And then New Zealand knew exactly what they needed to do. And maybe we can have the conversation of, oh, on the final day there should be back-to-back matches. It should be able to be done like that. Obviously, with the results we know now, that's clearly not going to apply. But then talk about Australia, Canada, and it is not fun to be an Australian rugby fan at the moment because right off the bat, within the first 5 minutes, Canada get a try. Shell is able to convert Hunt's score. By the time we get to like the 20-minute mark, we've already got three tries on the board, and I believe just before the stroke of half time, Royer goes over for another try. And you'll notice I'm only talking about Canada's scoring opportunities at the moment. That's because the halftime score was 26-0 to Canada. They already had secured the try bonus point, and we still have 40 minutes to go. Now, to be completely fair, Australia were able to get on the board just after halftime with their own try and conversion. Uh, but then Canada remembered that they still needed to rack up that points difference and were able to get three more tries, two of which were converted after halftime. So the final score was Australia 7, Canada 45. Definitely laying down the gauntlet, showing New Zealand, we're not here to be pushed around. We're gonna, if you want this Pacific Four crown, then you are gonna have to take it. I'll get on to New Zealand's response in a minute, but I thought that this was an incredible response. You can obviously tell, like, with a tied game, players on both sides are going to be very disappointed. But I think that Canada were able to rally again and show um, international women's rugby that Canada are second in the world and they're second in the world for a reason. Um, you know, it was another game that they played away. So they, after the game against New Zealand, they had to fly to Australia and then get all set up for that game against Australia. That can obviously have some detrimental effects to the body, even though it's, closer than Canada and the United States. It's still a 4-hour flight to get over there. And yeah, I think it was another incredible performance. It was great to see Karen Packney score another try for Canada. Always wonderful to see. Um, yeah, and Tessier spending the full 80 on the pitch as well. That was great to watch. Um, and again, the forwards have just been fantastic in this competition. And the thing is, we know is that without there are players missing, that we know that this team can be even better than it currently is. You know, I think one of the positives that you can take away from this is that Kevin Murray is going to have an absolute headache choosing the squad to take to England in August. But, that's just my input. Jeff, I'll throw it to you. What did you make of this game against Australia?
Going in, I thought they were going to need to put at least a 50-point win to have any shot at overcoming New Zealand's point differential advantage going into that final. Obviously, it was not enough, but it was a good showing, and they didn't really let up, which was, I thought, very important.
Mm.
They managed, there was a bit of a lull coming out of halftime, but they refocused quickly, and they were, as you said, still able to put another three or four tries on after Australia put some points on the board. So I was glad to see a pretty good 80-minute effort there. That's where I was mainly focused on with that.
Mm. And Ed, what were your insights from the game? Any interesting stats that you took away from it?
Yeah, a few interesting stats, but I after that game I posted on the Rugby Canada Facebook page that Canada, based on that performance, could be the number one team in the world if they get the right resources. Like the way that they played in that game, the way that the forwards fronted up, that rolling maul that they pushed over from 25 meters, I think it was just a beautiful sight to see. I think one of the things that really stood out to me was the emergence of Olivia Apps as a world-class nine. Obviously, she switched over from the sevens, but I thought she really took control of the match. It was great to see her just throwing inside passes. She was switching the point of play quite a bit from side to side. So she was really, really impressive. And to switch over, we've seen a bunch of the sevens players come in. Portia Woodman, Whitcliffe running in 7 tries in the USA game. Um,
Mm.
but not everybody transfers over that well. It's not as easy to go from sevens to 15s. So to see Apps playing so well, admittedly behind quite a dominant forward pack. So again, that's kind of what I'd like to re-emphasize here. Scrum win again in that game, 100%. Line out 75%. Restart win 86%. They dominated line breaks there, 14-4, and turnovers. They won 11-4 as well. Uh, Tackle percentage again a little bit low, 83%, should be up around the 90%. But the forward pack was really, really dominant. So that allowed Apps to actually have a really a controlling game around that ruck area. When it comes to some of those forward players, the loose forwards that are playing in there, Synth, Paquin, who else have we got there? Menon, the prop was really, really impressive. She averaged over the whole tournament 31 carries total, so she's carrying at least 10 times a game. Paquin is averaging 11 carries per game. But Paquin had 120 meters carried over the whole tournament and 44 tackles, which is top for Canada as well. So there's some incredibly impressive forwards emerging there. Paquin's she had the tournament of her life. So great performance from her overall, which is really interesting when Deguti comes back. How do they? That's the top players are playing in the loose forwards. The locks there, Royer and O'Donnell, were played really well. Had really high carries, really high tackles as well. So the forward pack is just doing really, really well, and I think we're seeing that consistency, that composure in the forward pack transferring into the backs and allowing a better ride for players like Apps.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, just to pick up on one point you highlighted of like how difficult it can be to go from sevens to 15s. So Portia Woman Wycliffe, obviously she has a long career in 15s. Um, and then she competed for New Zealand in the sevens at the Olympics, decided to retire from international rugby, realized she could potentially get another World Cup win under her belt, so came out of retirement. And for the first 2 games of the tournament, we're so used to seeing her on the score sheet that she was I don't want to say quiet but absent from that. And I think Portia may have realized that herself, that other people may be acknowledging that her contributions haven't been as visible as they used to be. um so in the 24th minute of the game against the USA, she scored a try, and then in the 26th, and then in the 41st, and then in the 45th, and then in the 58th, and then in the 69th, and then, just for good measure, in the 82nd as well. So I'll put this in comparison to all our listeners and viewers. Canada scored 7 tries in their game against Australia. Portia Woodman Wycliffe scored 7 tries on her own in the game against the USA. And, I think we were all disappointed, obviously, that New Zealand were able to get that point differential, and the USA basically faded away after the second half. But at halftime, it was only a 20-point advantage. So there was a bit of hope in the delusional Canadian fans, myself, that maybe the USA can actually put on a bit of a contest for New Zealand. And then Portia Woman Wycliffe was like, no, no, you can't. And yeah, racked up an impressive amount. She's now Canada, not Canada, sorry. She's now the Black Ferns all-time leading try scorer, I believe, on 45 tries. So prior to this game, she was on 38. So that, I mean, we said before the tournament began that Woodman Wycliffe coming back into the fold for international 15s. There was big talk of putting her in the center, which is where she's been playing in Women's Super Rugby. And then she'd been put on the wing for this entire tournament. So definitely, a bit of friction in terms of understanding where's that coming from. Well, the selection has definitely proven that it was the correct one in this game, at least. Yeah, I think she's back. I think that's a fair assessment to make.
Phenomenal
Um,
player, probably the greatest of all time, but there's also an aspect of the game called tackling that the USA would probably do well to think about the next time they play a game because she scored some pretty easy tries.
yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're picking up 7 tries in one international game, something is either working really well for you and is working really poorly for your opponents. Yeah, I mean, it's a bit dis. I know there's like a huge disparity between um, both Canada, New Zealand, and the USA and Australia at the moment. I'm hoping, as I've said in like previous episodes, that the rising tide lifts all boats, and we have a more competitive USA and a more competitive Australia for the Pacific Four series. If the series ever gets expanded, I hope those teams that join will also be competitive for this tournament because I think it's a fantastic tournament to have. And with the rise of women's rugby across the globe, more competition is definitely going to be the best thing that we can get out of this. So disappointing on a Canadian front that Canada was unable to retain the Pacific Four Series for 2025. Although I will point out that they've basically now gone 2 tournaments and haven't been beaten. So, silver linings and all that. Anyway, we are going to go from the senior teams to the under 20s teams. And a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the women's under 20s team doing a friendly tour to Ireland. But since we have recorded, they had the second game of that series, and it seems as though Ireland decided that they didn't want to be embarrassed at home, unlike the Australian senior women's team. And the final score for that second game was Ireland 32, Canada 14. Canada scoring their points in the first half, Ireland just being a step above this time round. But I think this has been an incredibly beneficial tour, not just for Canada, but for Ireland as well. I mean, last year we saw that in the WXV1, we had Ireland come in. They had a great match against Canada. They were able to beat the Black Ferns, which was another huge thing. And so I do enjoy seeing the rise of competitive teams across the world, regardless of whether I support them or not. And absolutely, I think this is a great tournament. I hope that the Transatlantic Quad Series returns for 2025, hopefully before the Women's World Cup takes place, but we shall see. But this has just been another great opportunity for these women to get some international experience under their belts. Unfortunately, there's been no recording or footage to like analyze of these games, and as they were classified as friendlies, I think the subs bench included 13 players for each team, so it's not really an official game. So all we were given were the halftime and the full-time scores. But I'm hoping that if the quad series does return, that is hopefully available, and we can talk about that, and we'll have the footage to be able to throw you to. Speaking of footage and lack thereof, the Oceania Rugby Under 20s Challenge has begun, and it was advertised that the first game of the series, Canada versus Samoa, would be available on rugbypass.tv. And then you log on to rugbypass.tv only to find that the countdown has pushed it back an hour. Now, when I first saw this, I thought, okay, there's been an issue at the pitch, maybe there's no medical team available, then you have to, put player safety first and foremost. Then I, instead of looking on social media like I should have done, I went back an hour later only to find that you couldn't watch the game at all. In fact, it even put the timer to the next day. That's when I went on social media to find out it wasn't just me, it was Rugby Pass's fault. For some reason that has yet to be explained, they were unable to show or broadcast either of the games that were held. Um, I did find out from BC Rugby News that they were able to get a live stream of I believe it was like Samoan TV that they were showing the game live, and as a result, they were able to get tidbits from the second half. But it's a bit disappointing not being able to see these games. What isn't disappointing is the final result: Canada 44, Samoa 20. So now this wouldn't be the time where we would go in depth and talk about, what were your favorite plays of the game. But unfortunately, as I said, Rugby Pass has not provided us with that context. So I'm just going to say, um, Jeff, um, when you saw that result, what were your thoughts going through your mind at that time?
Wow. I was very pleasantly surprised about that. Unfortunately, like you, I haven't been able to watch it. I hope to find some at least highlights on YouTube
Mhm.
later so I can watch it. I'm especially going to watch for Canada's number 10, Josh McIndoe. I've heard about him. He's actually, for the last two Canadian summers, he's been playing in New Zealand at my cousin's club. And he's mostly played at in the centers, usually 12, I believe, for my cousin. And I asked him 2 years ago when he told me about him, he just messaged me out of the blue saying, I have this Canadian, he's good. That's literally what he said. He's good. And when I saw the lineup, I quickly messaged him and asked him, "What do you think of him starting at 10?" He's like, "I've never actually seen him play at 10, but he has yeah. But he has a good head for the game," he said. And if he manages to stay focused in the game, he thought he could do well. Judging by the score line, it probably he did play well. So I'll be very interested to see Canada's lineup next week against Fiji, is it? I believe.
Yes. Yeah.
That'll be the
And
litmus test, that game against Fiji, because they've got a
uh,
much stronger youth pathway than either Samoa or Tonga. But also, New Zealand, if you're playing in New Zealand for a club, anywhere in New Zealand really, um, the dual playmaker is a huge part of New Zealand's history and of New Zealand's sort of strategy. They like to have at least two playmakers playing in or in the back line. So that could be at 12, it could be at 15, it could be in a number of different positions. So I wonder if your man there, Jeff, has just sort of learned a little bit more playmaking in that 12 position, which has allowed him to step into that 10 position.
well, the other thing I'll say that my cousin told me last year, because both times after the season he's gone back to UVic, was if he stayed in New Zealand, this was last year, he probably would have made Bay of Plenty U19s, and he
Mhm.
thinks he could have made Waikato U20s.
Right.
So clearly, like he told me, again, this is from a year ago, that judging by how he's going right now, if he's able to stay healthy, avoid any serious injuries in his continued growth of the game, he probably has potential for senior honors.
Nice.
That is very good news to hear, especially a player that can slot into number 10. Again, we'll wait until the Fiji game to get that as a litmus test. But yeah, basically, same question to you, Ed. Because I saw like I think before I went to bed, because the kickoff time was meant to be like 10 p.m. Eastern. Um, Before I went to bed, I said it was like Canada were leading by 1 point, and part of me was like, okay, let's see how they throw this away, and then um, yeah, then to wake up and see like not only did they win, but it was a dominant win at that. Yeah, what
With
do you make of the result, Ed?
Yeah, it's just encouraging to see youth teams winning games because, there's been all of the talk around Rugby Canada and how they're managing their different programs and how they're bringing people through and what the talent selection looks like. But for Canada to go and put 24 points on, the Samoan team would have been a big physical team. They would have, a lot of them would have been playing from young ages. So for Canada to come in and put 24 points on there, I think is a good result. Let's see how they back up.
Yeah, that's definitely something. We don't want to get too ahead of ourselves. We don't want to be burned with all this going on. I will say we did get a result from the Fiji Tonga game, which ran after Canada Samoa. The latest score we got for that was 41 to Fiji, 22 to Tonga. So, pretty similar score lines. The next game, as we mentioned, is Canada versus Fiji. That will be on June the 1st. And then concluding the series will be against Tonga on June the 6th. And at the moment, it's advertised on being rugbypass.tv. Then again, they also advertised that the Samoa match would be on rugbypass.tv, and that wasn't true. So we'll keep our nose to the grindstone. At the moment, it will be available to Canadians on Rugby Pass TV. If that changes, we encourage you to go onto social media, follow our social media channels, follow other social media channels such as BC Rugby News, and hopefully we'll be able to get a feed of some kind to be able to watch those games. So those are available on rugbypass.tv. If you're looking for any other rugby coming up, we have MLR games that will be on the Rugby Network, and we are also in the championship playoff rounds of the Premiership and the URC. Those will be available on Sportsnet Plus. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out more, as well as our written pieces, on our website, therougerugby.ca. You can also find the podcast directly on Spotify or on our YouTube channel at The Rouge Rugby. Make sure to like and subscribe and hit that bell notification to stay up to date with all our videos. We're also available across social media, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and Blue Sky, all at The Rouge Rugby. Jeff, where can people find you on social media?
You can find me on X at WP Rugby Jeff.
And Ed, where can people find you on social media?
On Facebook, Rugby 101 or the Rugby Prof on YouTube.
All right, and you can find me across social media at Hardman, spelled H4RDMAN. Well, that is where we're going to end this episode. Jeff, Ed, thank you both for joining me, and thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Rouge Rugby Podcast, where we talk about real Canadian rugby. We hope you can join us again next time.